Hi BookTube, it's Amy. We're back with the Anatomy of Bibliomania. I think we might be slightly crooked. That's a little better, but we're back with the Anatomy of Bibliomania on page 213. Feeling significantly better today now that the weather system and the pressure has shifted. Sinuses are not bothering me nearly as much today. So we'll continue reading on with single book Devotees. So too, there are readers who find a library in a single book. They are sometimes suspect, and it is most true what Seneca hath, as well in reading as eating, in books as diet, veritas delecta, certitu prodest, a bit of Latin there. Variety is delightful, but certainly more useful and profitable. Joubert gives reasons for this when he says that books which absorb our attention to such an extent that they rob us of all fancy for other books are absolutely pernicious, because they only bring fresh crochets and sex into the world. Surely that's not meant to be crochets. Crochets? I'm not sure what they're getting at there. Fresh crochets and sex into the world. The homo unis libri is proverbially formidable in all conversational figurants. And our footnote is taking us to Southey's The Doctor. Woe to him that reads but one book, quotes George Herbert. Yet for himself not a word or look I affect to own, but thy book and thy book alone. Our footnote taking us to Discipline. Dr. Johnson saw the poet William Collins in his poor lodgings at Islington with a New Testament in his hand. I have but one book, he said, but it is the best. When St. Thomas Aquinas was asked in what manner a man might become learned, he replied, by reading one book, meaning the Bible. When Sir Walter Scott was near his end, he asked Lockhart to take him into the library at Abbotsford and place him near the window so that he might look once more upon the Tweed. And this being done, he asked Lockhart to read to him. And when asked what book, he said, Need you ask? There is but one. It is our duty to live among books, said John Henry Newman, especially to live by one book, a very old one. Hyperius holds that by means of this book the mind is erected from all worldly cares, and hath much quiet and tranquillity. For, as Austin hath it, it is a scientia scientiarum omni mel dulcior, omni pain suavoir, omni vino hilarar. The supreme knowledge, sweeter than all honey, pleasanter than all bread, more cheering than all wine. For neither, as Christendom well adds, those boughs and leaves of trees which are plashed for cattle to stand under in the heat of the day in summer, so much refresh them with their acceptable shade, as the reading of the Scriptures doth recreate and comfort a distressed soul in sorrow and affliction. No songs, for Milton, comparable to the songs of Sion, no orations equal to those of the prophets, and for Coleridge, Homer, and Virgil are disgustingly tame, and Milton scarcely tolerable after Isaiah, or St. Paul's epistle to the Hebrews, though neither he nor Milton was homo unis libri, but non nostrum tantus componere lite, as Sir W. Waller, and our footnote takes us to Divine Meditations. Sir W. Waller, who adventured among many books, but ever came back to his Bible. Write thy law in my heart, he prayed, and I shall become the best book here. In the opposite extremes are those who attach themselves to a given book from among the infinite variety of general writings. Variety I ask not, give me one to live perpetually upon, quoting from Cowley's Manna. Among profane or secular adherents, there are enthusiasts like Parson Adams in Joseph Andrews, who read only in a copy of Eclesiastes, and Boffin, and our mutual friend, who doted on Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. These two may be taken as indicative of the rest, and that their concentration is justified, will be amply shown both here and in that section where I recall many instances of readers who, without confining themselves to one book, return to their favorite again and again with cumulative delight, as Hilaire Belloc, who in our own time finds no book so readable as Gibbon. He can pick him up at any moment, open where he will, read him for 10 minutes or half an hour or half a day, and lay him down delighted. Not a dull line in the enormous work, certainly not a dull page, and one can take it up at any period of one's life and so delight in it. He himself has read Gibbon in this fashion for 35 years. You can go back to him as often as you like, read the same passage over and over again each time, within a few days of the last, and suffer no more fatigue than you suffer from the prospect of a familiar and satisfying landscape. So great a devotion might have marked him out for a one-book man, and thus absorbing him, I may say, but there, for the grace of God, goes boffin. But 'tis a miracle of books, as of all masterpieces of art, that no familiarity can stale their infinite variety, for like the happy melodist and the poet, they are, in their separate and individual entities, forever piping songs forever new. Malherbe, the father of French poetry, had for sole favourite Horace, whom he called Breviary. Horace was his companion when out walking, and he laid him on his pillow at night. Keats was very near agreeing with Hazlitt that Shakespeare was enough for us. He thought he would never read any other book much, and the Duke of Buckingham would have only Homer. Read Homer once, and you can read no more, for all books else appear so mean, so poor. Verse will seem prose, but still persist to read, and Homer will be the books you need. Legend, no less than history, has records of such like concentrate readers, as that one from whom Merlin got his magic books. Little glassy-headed hairless man who lived alone in a great wild on grass, read but one book, and ever reading grew, so grated down and filed away with thought, so lean his eyes were monstrous. From Tennyson's Merlin and Vivian, Idylls of the King. Dibdin tells of a man who declared that there were only two books in the world, the Bible and the Euclid, and add, mine author, he was not so far out of the way as would at first seem. William Roberts notes several who appear for the most part to have made a constant companion of some particular book, or who have favoured some single class of books. St. Jerome slept with a copy of Aristotle under his pillow. Lord Clarendon had a couple of favourites, Livy and Tacitus. Lord Chatham had a good classical library with an especial fondness for Barrow. Kant, who never left his birthplace, Königsberg, had a weakness for books of travel, and Sir William Jones loved his Caesar. Of this kind, too, was the Earl of Longsdale, who told John Wilson Croker that he was a worshipper of Arthur Young's. He sang his praises as though he were a god, and thought him the most truthful writer and fuller of information upon any subject than any other author. In his 150 volumes that he wrote and edited, like Shakespeare in another book, the Bible, peradventure, you find everything or something, apropos to every subject. This Earl kept duplicate copies of Young's works at his town mansion in London, and at Lowther Castle, and odd copies at his places at Barnes and Whitehaven, so that he could always practice his bibliolatry. Bibliolatry, that's a new one for me. Bibliolatry, bibliolatry. Tristram Shandy gives out in his Life and Opinions, if you will permit this farther piece of evidence for fiction, that his father was a most notable instance of the one-book enthusiast, his anchorage being Slockenbergus on noses. Every page of him was a rich treasure of inexhaustible knowledge to my father. He could not open him amiss. And he would often say, in closing the book, that if all the arts and sciences in the world, with the books which treated of them, were lost, should the wisdom and policies of governments, he would say, through disuse ever happen to be forgot, and all that statesmen had wrote or caused to be written upon the strong or the weak sides of courts and kingdoms, should they be forgot also, the Slockenbergus only left, there would be enough in him, in all conscience, he would say, to set the world a-going again. Well may he treasure this institute of all that was necessary on noses and everything else. He was inseparable from that notable work at matin, noon, and vespers, from Hofenslagenbergus, his recreation and delight. It was ever in his hands, and so worn, so glazed, so contrited and attrited was it with fingers and with thumbs in all parts, from one end even unto the other, that you would have sworn it had been a canon's prayer book. It will be seen from these examples that any single book may serve the end of a whole library for those who are disposed by nature to one book, and in final proof. I may yet cite the instance of Sir Walter Elliot of Kellant Hall in Somersetshire, as a man who, for his own amusement, never took up any book but the Bartonage, where he found occupation of an idle hour, and consolation in a distressed one. There his faculties were roused into admiration and respect by contemplating the limited remnants of the earliest parents. There, any unwelcome sensation arising from the domestic affairs changed naturally into pity and contempt as he turned over the almost endless creations of the last century. And there, if every other leaf were powerless, he could read his own history with an interest that never failed. And our quote there is from Jane Austen's Persuasion, which is exactly what I thought we were beginning to read a quote from. Persuasion, where her father is obsessed with rereading the family genealogy and looking at his own lineage and pedigree per se. But that brings us to the end of that particular section on page 217 here. The next section is titled Reading Many Books at Once. So exactly the opposite of what we've just read here. And I think my tea back here is cool enough to drink. This is a lavender black tea that I had delivered today, but I've served it in my brand new Ottawa Charge mug here, our professional women's hockey league team here in Ottawa. So I'm going to sit and enjoy my tea here and perhaps pick up another book to read at my leisure here.